And on this episode of Green Signals, your railway podcast, the National Audit Office reports into the DfT's rail transformation programme. Finds it has made limited progress. Quelle surprise. 7 of the 12 high-level benefits are rated amber, with the other 5 flashing red. The DfT reorganises again. Is it just one more example of rearranging deck chairs, or worrying evidence of an even tighter grip from the centre? We see what the budget announced for the railways. Spoiler alert, pretty much nothing that hasn't already been announced. And Grand Union is granted open access rights for a new 4 times a day service from London Euston to Stirling from June 2025 for 5 years. But Richard is really cross about it. We'll find out why soon. Hello and welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and...
from me, Richard Bowker.
Here we are again. As usual, if you're enjoying Green Signals, please give the episode a thumbs up. It'll help us provide more of what you want. That's if you're watching on YouTube, of course. And please hit that subscribe button. Completely free. And it really does help us grow the show and give you more of what you'd like. Okay, let's get on with it and move on to the news. Because again, like the weather, there's lots of it this week. And we are focusing on government stuff today, so please don't switch off mentally or physically because it is not as boring as sometimes government stuff can be. This is really important. On March 8th, the National Audit Office published a report entitled Rail Reform, the Rail Transformation Programme. Purpose of the report was to see how the DfT has been getting on with planning and setting up its programme to deliver reforms, the value for money achieved, and the progress it has made to date. Their conclusions? They include DfT committed the rail reform programme to a timetable that it had identified as high risk, reflecting ministerial ambition, but without a clear plan for what it needed to implement the plan. Governance arrangements for the programme have been complex and ineffective. DfT has made limited progress against its plans, with most of its work and expected savings now delayed until the next Parliament, at least. Delays to reform have added pressure to DfT finances and incurred yet higher costs to the taxpayer for longer. DfT is putting in place interim arrangements ahead of resetting how it delivers rail reform in the next Parliament, but it is too soon to say if these will be effective. So, is there anything positive to take from this report at all? But before you start, Richard, can I slip in an extra question on behalf of plenty of listeners and YouTube viewers? And I have to say, I hold my hand up, and that includes me, because I've never asked myself this question before. I know the National Audit Office is important, and we've reported on many times on what it's done. Likewise, the Public Accounts Committee, chaired currently by Dame Meg Hillier. Do they do the same job, similar job, overlapping jobs? What? I know they're both important, but perhaps you can, as a former accounting officer, you can give us a view of what they are and maybe just a sentence about how serious this is for the DfT.
Okay, so they are kind of working in tandem. One feeds into the other. So the National Audit Office are the team that go in and arguably do the field work, the legwork, produce the reports and the analysis, which the Public Accounts Committee then read and grill the various spending departments about. Right. So think of it like the board of a company. So the board's got overall responsibility, but it's the executive that are kind of doing all the work. If I can put it that way, right? So that's one feeds into the other. They're not competing. They're part of the same funnel, if you like. And is this serious for the department? Well, it's really embarrassing, and it's bad because of what the NAO have said, and in particular because of what the DfT had previously committed in terms of the spending review, in terms of the benefits that this programme was going to deliver. You know, they're not happening. They're not coming through on stream. So,
and we're talking about 3 years since 21 when a lot of this stuff was kicked off. I mean,
Yeah.
If I might summarise it a bit satirically, it comes across to me in very elegant sort of parliamentary language as the NAO saying that the DFT can't really find its backside with both hands on getting this job done.
Yeah, well, that's pretty fair. Yeah, you're right. Not entirely elegant, but also quite accurate. You asked a question earlier. You said, is there any good news? Is there anything positive to take from this report at all? And the answer is not really. But it would also be a mistake to dismiss it as just kind of one of those things. I think what the DFT and indeed the government do next is quite critical. There are some mitigating factors. I mean, if you want to be really charitable, which I know, might come as, a little bit tricky. If you want to be really charitable, the Williams plan and the white paper that it effectively was came at the height of the pandemic, really. So that was in May 2021. And there was a lot of stuff going on. Let's face it, there's a lot, I mean, for everybody, not just the DFT. So, that's a real thing. And the other thing that I think is a genuine factor in this is I'm not entirely certain that the DFT are quite in control of their own destiny, really. So, and let me explain what I mean by that, and you'll have a view, I'm sure, on this. When we had the announcement about HS2, for example, nobody in the DFT, or we're led to believe that nobody was really consulted in that process. I mean, what was happening
exactly
was special advisors and political advisors. Everybody talks about policy exchange and their role in this. Tufton Street is often used in a slightly sort of
shorthand,
rude shorthand. Exactly. They were very, very heavily involved, and so you kind of go, well, did the DFT really have the ability to necessarily do its job? But that is being quite charitable. As you rightly said, they've had
3 years.
3 years to do this. And the Williams plan didn't take like a week to produce. The DFT had been working on that with Keith Williams for a long, long time. So, yeah, maybe we're being a bit too charitable. The thing is a mess.
Well, I mean, I've read most of the report now. I hold my hand up and said I haven't been all through the tables and figures and graphs because I'm not good with numbers, Richard. You're our numbers man. But I've read all the words, and it just seems to me damning. The DFT and HM Treasury at odds with each other from the start, particularly on the role of GBR. But Section 2, I just scribbled down a few things which stood out to me. The DFT's timetable for reform meant that it was developing what it needed as it went along and without having people's skills needed in place. That's 2.6. 2.8, the DFT and the Treasury disagreed about key areas of reform, particularly on the impact on revenues. 2.9, unclear reporting relationships, unclear leadership and accountabilities, conflict between, program governance and the DFT, policy changes leading to the scrapping of the centralised online ticket retailing system, which is what we needed. 2.16, that's the point about the DFT and the Treasury being at odds. I mean, that's where I actually scribbled in the notes, couldn't find its backside with both hands. I mean, that seemed to me an excoriating list of things to level against a big government spending department, which I have to say has had the temerity to lecture the rest of us on our shortcomings.
That's the best bit, isn't it? Do you know what? I was wondering if you go to that. That bit of don't do what we do, just do what we say is writ large, isn't it? When we had the thing about the 4.7 billion of reallocated funds from HS2, the government were at pains to lecture everybody on consultation. I mean, Henry Murison made exactly that point on this show. There's an incredible paragraph in the press release. I know the press release isn't the report, but it's what the NAO the message they want to get across, right? Which sort of summarizes quite a lot of what you just said there. It says, the the NAO found governance arrangements for the programme have been complex and ineffective. And then they've obviously had the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, and DFT reported governance was confused, accountability is unclear, there was not agreement across stakeholders on the scope and delivery approach of the programme. And you kind of go, blimey. So they started something not knowing why they were doing it, what they were doing it, when they were doing it, who was doing it, and how they were going to manage it. But apart from that, it was fine.
And they were making it up as they went along.
Yeah.
I mean, when you read comments like the DFT not set up to secure value for money, just let's say that sink in. Another thing that really caught my eye was I'm going to say quite direct criticism of the continuing separation of costs and revenues between the DFT and the Treasury. It just struck me as totally and utterly damning. So first the DFT doesn't get the legislation done over 3 years and is now screwing up the interim plans made that's now required because of that first failure. I think we ought to put a link to this NAO report onto the website so that people can read it themselves, because by definition, even on our long-form discussion format of the podcast, we cannot get in to the full horror of this report. I mean, how would you have felt you've been an accounting officer for a big government department? If this was about your department, how would you have felt?
Oh, I'm ashamed. But I know it's easy to say, perhaps, but I'm not sure we'd have let it get to this point, right?
Well, you wouldn't.
One of the things that's interesting about it, and you don't have to be into numbers to get these reports, as you rightly said. There's a table of the governance arrangements, right? And just in English, i.e., who makes the top decisions and how do they filter down into actions? Okay? Mm-hmm. And it's unbelievable in terms of its complexity. And I look at that and go, that was always destined to fail, right? And that's the real concern that certainly I've got here, which is when these things go wrong, and this one is certainly at one level, this has gone wrong. Usually what people do is go, do you know what? We need to just take a slight step back. What they seem to be doing here is doubling down and putting more process in place. And that is a real concern. I know we're going to come on and talk about reorganisations, absolutely. But that's a real worry. Now, what we've not mentioned in all of this is GBR transition team, the bit of Network Rail that's been doing a lot of the legwork on this.
It's actually been doing a good job, Rufus Boyd and the rest of them seem to have worked very hard on some quite sensible stuff.
Well, working hard and delivering the outputs the railway sector needs are not necessarily the same thing, but I will absolutely agree with you that there's been a lot of activity. And I look at this now and go, oh, are we just overcomplicating this? Or is this just becoming too big a project? You hear about these massive IT projects that just at the end, somebody just goes, you know what? We've made a mess of this. It's too complicated. We need to kind of almost like reset. There's a little bit of me feels, well, quite a lot of me feels a little bit like that with this. It just feels as if it's just become this behemoth, this sort of monster that no one can manage anymore.
And of course, with this constant sort of refrain going on, as you've mentioned in the past, about open access, which, we've seen news about that this week, haven't we?
Yeah, and you could take the view that an open access decision is really sort of quite tiny in the grand scheme of things, and it probably is, right? Probably is. But
it's indicative of their thought at the minute, isn't it?
Well, what the thing that is perhaps the most worrying thing of all is, for me, is that because government projects come and go and with varying degrees of mess and organisational nightmares and poor governance arrangements, but the world seems to kind of carry on, really. If this rail reform had an objective that we thought, do you know what, despite the fact they're making a total hash of us getting there, at least getting there is where we want to go to. That would be one thing. But I keep going back to what Andrew Haynes said on the podcast when we had him on for the big interview. And he said that he believes that the current state of performance is really down to the nature of the contractual matrix.
He did.
Right, and the interfaces between all the various actors and parties. And he may well have a point there. I mean, he's much, much closer to it than we are. However, the rail reform bill and everything that the DfT are putting in place here, this rail transformation program, is predicated on replacing the current contractual matrix with a different contractual matrix, right? And it's not clear to me in all of this how or whether that will work. And I do wonder whether everybody has now lost sight of what the end goal is and is just trying to fix issues and problems on a micro basis as they arise.
Well, the NAO report does say that they're making it up as they go along, don't they?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so there's a lot of that. I'd also urge people to have a look at your excellent 12-threaded tweet, which you put up yesterday on this very...
Yeah, sorry about that. I got a bit carried away.
But you did give us fair warning in the first one it was going to go on some, so we could all settle back on a Saturday evening and know we were in for a lot.
Yes, thank you.
But no, it was good stuff. And I had a quick look at it this morning, and as an indication of the interest, it's had 50,000 impressions on X, which I'm now trying to start to say.
And you know what? Interesting, and this is not kind of self-aggrandizement in any way, because I'm used to getting quite a lot of, you're talking rubbish on X. On this occasion, I think there's only one or two people, some character made a very strange remark, but most people almost overwhelmingly have gone, yeah.
He's got it on, yeah.
Now, is that because we're just sort of preaching to the gallery? I did probably.
Echo chamber stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be a degree of that. But what I find teeth-grindingly frustrating through that entire report is the NAO is implying, or the stuff it said that's gone wrong, is stuff that seasoned commentators, and I include Roger Ford and various other people who write about the railway on an ongoing basis and have done for many years, have been saying for years. All the things that the NAO report are now saying were going wrong. We said it at the time, and yet they just grind on with it. And that leads me to one of the comments you made in tweet 8 of the 12, which I've printed out here, which if people watching on YouTube,
I'm very impressed.
They can see there's highlighting and everything, Richard.
And everything. Wow.
I know.
Right.
But in tweet 8, you said something which absolutely summed everything up to me. And I shan't be so praiseworthy many times, Richard. So make
I'm
the
actually
most
sat down at the moment.
Well, that's a good thing. The common thread to the problems of the last 10 years is the DfT.
Yeah.
And that's it in a nutmeg, in a nutshell. And yet again, you've repeated, which is a good thing because campaigns need repeating. We need to focus on delivering a safe, boring, predictable, reliable and simpler railway. If we can do that and be allowed to get on with it. But there's absolutely no sign of that happening. And that open access thing, this thing, the one during the week that we heard about, is it Grand Union? 4 trains a day, Euston to Stirling.
Well, I think we're coming to that later in the show.
Oh,
yeah.
I shall leave it now. But there is generally, it's yet more contractual overlay, isn't it?
It is. Do you know, the one thing I wasn't saying in that tweet, that you just read out that bit, was I was not saying there is no role for the DfT.
No.
Right? I absolutely reject any notion that we should abolish the DfT or we should abolish the Treasury or they shouldn't be involved. That's rubbish, okay? And a couple of people have suggested that either that's what we should do or that's what I would say. No. The DfT, it is absolutely right that the government has a handle on its vision for, its policy for the railways and the outcomes it wishes to see from it in return for the significant amounts of public money that are going into it. That is absolutely right. And I would defend that forever. Okay.
Agreed.
Issue here is not that. It's then getting involved with things that they don't have the skills to do, which is, the operational performance and delivery and these sort of complex, sort of commercially intertwined issues. That's the bit I'm saying that's where the common thread of things going wrong is when they've got involved with that stuff.
But they don't seem to learn, do they?
No.
As you said, as you said in your multiple threaded tweet, they have not got a good record on leading and managing big projects, whether it's HS2 or anything else. But they seem to scutter from disaster to disaster without any learning from it and seeming to think that they are good at doing this sort of thing. And it's just not true. I mean, I think I said last week or very recently on one of these programs, one of these pods, that for me is what GBR, the Integrated Rail Body, whatever the hell we're going to call it, BRB2, is it needs to be populated by I have to say, rapidly dwindling number of experienced railway men and women who can make this happen, hopefully led by Andrew Haynes, who can say to government, what sort of railway do you want and how much money have we got to provide it? Then let us get on with that. And that requires sort of a lot of emotional intelligence and sort of courage by the government department. Say, fine, we trust you. Now get on and do it.
Yeah.
Rather than this constant meddling and tightening of grip, which is just brassing off the sort of people who can make it better. And we are losing them. You and I could both name railwaymen who have left, and women who have left the industry recently, who we are going to need.
If we're going to be fair to the DfT, though, they are under the same pressure within government. What are you doing? What are you doing to sort it out? All this money's going out. How are you getting a grip of it? So really, again, we're being a bit charitable. We can't just blame the DfT. This is government's attitude generally.
But you can blame them. If you and me, you or me had a problem of some sort, we might say to each other, look, I need some help sorting this out. Sort of recognising each other's skills and qualities and all the rest of it. The DfT never does that. It always knows best and consistently ignores the people who know. There was a very telling line in that National Audit Report that said that the DfT, let's get this right, is going to need the buy-in of the wider sector, and it is going to find that difficult. I can't remember the wording, but it effectively said the way the DfT's behaved, it's lost the faith of the industry.
And Roger Ford, who you mentioned a little while ago, tweeted, I think either last night when I put it out or this morning, and said, one of the interesting things is that the McNulty report, which is one of the many reviews that have been done into the railways, and the Williams review and the plan have arguably failed because it's a central government department trying to impose a system on a fragmented railway, instead of potentially getting the railway to do it to itself. Now, the DfT will say, oh, yes, but that's why we set up GBRTT. They're the ones that are actually doing the legwork. Well, I don't think anybody's quite going to fall for that. No. So, it's all a bit of a mess. But there is good news, the DfT are going to reorganise.
Just before we move on to that, because yes, I don't want to. There's just one last point I want to make on that. There's a very interesting section in that report where they actually list umpteen reports that's been done since McNulty and Shaw and Hendy and all the rest. A good half a dozen bullet points, and I think there's a sentence that says something like, "Many of the problems identified in Williams had been identified before in these reports."
Yep, that's a good point.
Right. On to because if you're really screwing things up, let's reorganise. You see, we'll never fall prey to that, Richard, because there's only three of us. There's only you, me, and Steph. So
yeah, I mean, we can change the order that the pictures appear on the screen, but that's basically all we can do. Yeah.
So, sorry, you were saying about reorganisation.
Yeah, well, word on the street is that the DfT are going to reorganise. Nothing particularly wrong with that as a concept. Sometimes things don't work out, and it's perfectly sensible to change things around. But this one's, I think, slightly worrying because one of the core elements of this reorganisation is the creation of a group within the department. Just so people, if people are not aware, so the head of a spending department is the permanent secretary. They're the senior civil servant inside the spending. So there is a permanent secretary of the Department of Transport, who is a lady called Bernadette Kelly. Okay, And then within the department, there are groups. Exactly the same as would be in any other company. So there's no difference between that.
No.
And inside the rail bit, there are sections. So there's one for doing major projects like HS2, but there's going to be one, and I forget exactly what it's called now. It's like the Rail Infrastructure and Service Delivery Group. I mean, it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it? But what it is it's bringing together the bit that used to look after passenger franchises with the bit that looks at infrastructure. And you could say, oh, well, that's quite logical because that's what GBR is going to be in the future. It's going to be bringing these two things together. But the thing that absolutely stopped me in my tracks was the comment where it said that, and I put this in the tweet, is that this will focus on performance,
day-to-day, yeah.
the day-to-day railway, operational performance of the day-to-day railway. The one thing that pretty much everybody outside of government thinks that the DfT should not be doing, right? And really made me go, oh, flipping heck.
So what's it doing? Tightening its grip, second-guessing whatever comes out of GBR, getting in ahead of the curve to make sure they keep the control. I saw that as well, and I thought
but that's what you've just said there. That's the real worry, Nigel. The real worry is this bit about we're going to loosen the strings, apron strings. Once we've got GBR, they will be charged with it. Fine. In which case, where's the bit that says, oh, and by the way, we're reorganising, but of course, when we've got GBR, we will disband. Right?
Yeah, that quote you were looking for from your tweet was, it is apparently going to be, quote, focused on the day-to-day operational performance on the railway. Well, Is that not what GBR is supposed to be?
Yeah. But the organisation that should not be doing that and micromanaging it is the DfT. And so you're right. My concern was the same as yours. This is kind of a precursor for more grip, and they kind of always wrap this up as, oh, we need more oversight, we need more governance, we need more
red tape.
Well, it is. That's practically what it is.
Outcome,
we need It's just like, no, we need less of those things. You need to set the policy, you need to set the parameters, and then you need to trust and empower people to deliver. And yes, they might occasionally mess it up. I mean, the NAO suggests that you're pretty good at doing that anyway, DfT, but you need to you need to empower, liberate, and trust. That's the key thing. And there is this reorganisation suggests bad old ways.
The complete opposite.
Yeah.
I mean, again, one of your comments in that multi-tweet, the penny has still not yet dropped with DfT officials or ministers. I mean, that is deeply, deeply worrying, because if the penny hasn't dropped and they haven't understood, the first thing you need to solve any problem is to fully understand it, isn't it? And accept that there's a need for change, and certainly take a candid look at your own failings. And none of that is happening, is it? But this group, Richard, this group that's going to be this star chamber for railways, who's going to run that? You might get a phone call.
Well, after these pods. I think,
somebody might say, you're such a smart aleck, you know all the answers, you run it.
Oh, well, I don't. Well, one thing's for sure, just in case anybody thinks I do think I know all the answers, I know that I do not, right? But I do know a couple of things. I do know that if you are going to govern, and I mean that govern in a project or a client sense, not govern as in terms of, the Prime Minister and his cabinet. If you're going to govern a project or a program or an activity, clarity over who is doing what, and where the boundaries are, and the methods of dealing with things that will go wrong for day to day are absolutely essential. And that's the bit that we don't seem to have done yet. It is not done here. It is not clear that we know who's doing what, and it's absolutely clear that the government do not trust the industry to do it and get it sorted. And that's the bit I do understand.
The NAO has said that. But what we do know is that the high-speed rail group is going to be brought together with Northern Powerhouse Rail to become the Major Rail Projects Group, the MRPG, under Alan Over. And a sentence which caught my eye towards the end of that paragraph said, as part of these changes, we have asked Peter Wilkinson to move to work with Alan on resetting HS2, drawing on Pete's deep rail and commercial expertise and to increase focus on providing a great service for passengers. I wonder if that's might be summarised under that famous expression from Ronald Reagan. Hello, the most frightening words ever, half a dozen or so.
The 9 words, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, I'm here. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help
you. I don't know. I don't even know what reset HS2 means, to be honest. But
no, I don't think they do either. But
what I do know is it means that the other group we talked about, the Rail Infrastructure Service Delivery Group, which includes what used to be the franchising bit, is going to have a new leader. Well, that killed the conversation, didn't it? Well, look,
rendered the pair of us speechless momentarily. Which, if you listen to the audio pod, it's all right. Your stream hasn't broken. Richard and I just given up in despair at that point.
Rendering ourselves speechless is not a very good idea on a podcast.
No, it's not. So we're back now.
We're back. I don't know. It's not great days. I did also say in the tweet, I just hope that Louise Haigh, presuming two things: one, that Labour do win the next election, and two, that she's then the Secretary of State for Transport, actually does approach this in a different way, and it's getting a grip on the government side is proving to be almost as big an issue as getting to grip on the delivery side. There
was an instant response. I can't remember, sadly, who it was last night, because, in amongst those 50,000 impressions and the associated responses, somebody said, what did they say? I paraphrase. Nice thread, Richard. The DFT are going to be off their Christmas card list, but I'm hoping Louise Haig's got you on speed dial.
Yeah, it was quite good, wasn't it? I don't know.
We're prepared to help out, aren't they?
We're always prepared.
If anybody wants to come and have a sensible conversation with us about where the railway should go, so Louise Haigh, if you'd like to come along and have a chat with Richard and me here, we'd be very pleased to host you and have a decent discussion.
Definitely. Should we talk about the budget? Yeah, it won't take long.
Well, it won't. For those of you watching on YouTube, you were kind enough, Richard, to send out a clip of the bit of the budget which is about transport, and I have it here.
Yeah,
3 paragraphs. Yeah. The first sentence made me want to screw this paper up and throw it across the room, which reads: "The government is committed to ensuring that the UK has the right transport infrastructure to drive economic growth." The words line dancing through my mind at this point are not really podcastable, so I shall.
Oh, go on then. It's all right. I don't think the same rules apply, do they?
It's just it's not so much bollocks; it's untrue bollocks, isn't it?
Okay, that's good. So I didn't think you were going to go there, but
you invited me to, and I never knowingly under-invited.
It was a bit depressing, wasn't it? And do you know what? That was from the actual printed budget report.
I know.
I don't think any of that was in the speech.
Paragraph 4.12, it says here.
I don't think there was any reference to railways at all in the actual speech.
There wasn't, but 4.13 has also got a deeply depressing opening sentence. "The government is committed to delivering a privately financed HS2 Euston station." What was it you said about half a dozen pods ago? The first thing we had to remember about Euston Station is it's a station. Well, that probably condemns it to being buried New Street style under a load of shops and flats and business.
Oh, well, if it did even that, I suppose it would be progress. I'm really worried about Euston at the moment, because a privately led and financed solution for a major London terminus
is ridiculous.
Is not in the best interests of a piece of national transport infrastructure. There you go.
That's a polite way of putting it. And the government is establishing a ministerial task force. Oh,
there we go. See, we got another task force, another group.
We can all relax then, because it's going to oversee the next stages of delivery, set strategic direction, and facilitate decision-making, as well as a Euston housing delivery group.
That'd be wouldn't it?
And then port 4.14 tells us it's also upgrading the timetable on the East Coast Main Line from December 24. Shouldn't that have happened over the last 3 Decembers?
Yeah, that was why I said, when we were chatting last night, I can't think that most of this has already been either done or it's late or
Reheats.
certainly not new anyway.
It's microwave reheats.
Microwave reheats. That's quite good. That's good. No, it's the budget was interesting, wasn't it? I tell you what, we got one thing wrong on when we said last week. I thought that part of the tax cut stuff would be paid for by contracting public expenditure, but it's actually stayed as a 1% increase. But actually, interesting when you read the NAO report, which we've done today, so I'm not going back to that. But the NAO report does shine a light on just how much the DfT committed to the Treasury in terms of savings as part of this spending review. And a very interesting comment was that it said, listen to this, DfT agreed with HM Treasury to deliver total savings of 2.6 billion by 2024-25, with most of this coming from workforce reforms. So if you've ever wondered why that is not getting fixed, it's because they're just so desperate. They've basically committed a lot of the savings, or what they think of the savings. So anybody out there who thinks that an incoming Labour government are going to have, assuming that's what it is, are going to have a load of cash to throw around. I don't think so. So the only solution to this, it will never be imposed by the Treasury. It will never be imposed by the department. A solution, that is. The only solution is the railway industry getting itself sorted out. And I'll believe that now for the rest of time.
Well, it's always been true. Again, there's a line in that NAO report that said the DfT is now committed to doing what it can ahead of legislation. Some of us have been saying that since Williams came out. There's a lot we could be getting on with. But they have completely screwed it up. And yet now we're going to get more of it in this new group. It's deeply depressing. The railway industry as well needs to get off its knees and say, look, we can do this and we're going to do that. I mean, a bit more of the spirit, I have to say. I mean, Rail Partners has come in for some criticism from some people. But, Andy Bagnall's speech at the Bradshaw thing was really passionate. And, that line about the railways won't be important in this election, but this election is going to be really important for the railways. We need more of that.
We do. We do. It is difficult. It is, because I think somebody tweeted last night saying, "Oh yeah, but if they put their head above the parapets, they'll get it chopped off." And I think somebody else said, "Yeah, but that's Adrian Shooter and Ian Coucher did exactly that and got the electrification program turned around." I mean, whether it was just them, I don't know. And then somebody else said, "Yeah, but it's a different world." I'm not convinced. Right, I'm not convinced. We've got some really high quality people.
Yeah.
And I think if everybody stood up with one voice, they would be listened to. But I don't know.
I mean, that you referred to Shooter and Coucher there. That I even remember when it was. It was 2008 when they wrote to Dr. Mike, who was there at the DfT in charge then, and they turned around the attitude on electrification, didn't they? They absolutely did. Well, we need a bit more of that sort of letter writing and agitating and campaigning like that, don't we?
A bit more daring do. That'd be good.
Daring do instead of daring don't.
Very good. Should we do the quiz? I think we should move on. What about you?
I absolutely do. It's about time we had a bit of good news. So, because if we got a quiz, we've presumably got a winner. Which after all the misery of the discussion we've had today, we could do with a bit of a cheer. I was going to say a bit of a fanfare, but I'm going to resist.
Oh my goodness! Please don't do that.
I'm going to resist the temptation.
I'm still traumatized from the last one. Right. So last week's question was this. It was, who said accidents don't happen by accident? Right, which is a great line, isn't it? Anyway, the answer was Sir Herbert Walker, who was the chairman of the Southern Railway, following the Sevenoaks rail crash in 1927. So well done to Andrew Peel 999, who was the first person to get that right on YouTube. Andrew, if you're listening, could you send us an email to info@greensignals.org, because we need to know where to send you your mug. But well done on getting the question right. I've got another question for this week's quiz. I have no idea whether this is going to cause controversy or not, but I'm going to give it a go.
I'm agog.
I'm agog, right.
I
This
don't know
is the
what's
question.
coming.
Where was the steepest section of track that was adhesion worked in Britain that saw regular passenger use? So it could be still open, it might be closed. So where was the steepest section of track that saw regular passenger use that was adhesion worked? And that means, for those who don't know, it was just basically the engine with its steel
Just a
wheels on
conventional
steel rail.
locomotive on conventional track.
Correct. If you think you know the answer to that, let us know. Drop us a line, tweet, send us a comment on YouTube. And I think we might have to have a jury on this one, because I've got a funny feeling there might be some multiple
I'm going to say,
answer.
I can. We'll talk about it when we've stopped recording, but I can think of one very steep piece of railway, which is steeper than the normally referenced steepest main line. I'm just not sure whether it ever had passenger traffic.
Oh, you see, it's a good question. It's a good question, isn't it? Right, so there we go. Right, that's the quiz.
Excellent. I'm enjoying these quizzes. They're really good. And I think folk enjoy getting stuck in and giving us lots of answers as well. Bit of engagement, can't beat it.
So we have some good news. Well, actually, I think some of us think it's maybe a bit more good news than others.
Go on then.
Well, one thing that got announced this week, which did generate some quite positive reaction, was the announcement that Grand Union had won the right to operate 4 trains a day from London Euston to Stirling via the West Coast Main Line from 2025, I think. I think they've got a 5-year ride.
They did.
So
and this was like referenced at the head of the programme, said you weren't happy about it.
No, I'm not happy about it. I'm not happy about it. But a lot of people were, because they said, oh, that's fantastic more choice for consumers. And that's a marvelous, marvelous thing. But I'll tell you why I'm not happy about it. And let's see if we've got the same view. I'm not happy about it for a number of reasons. One, West Coast Main Line is chock-a-block. It's very constrained in terms of capacity, and this will make it more challenging. Now, there will be some, we've done all the modelling, we've done all the analysis, it's all fine. It is a little bit like threading eyes, through needles and all the rest of it. So,
and in the rough and tumble of everyday service,
so
modelling frequently just doesn't work, does it?
And then you've got risks of perturbation and reliability and so on. So that's one issue.
Rough and tumble.
Another issue is that we're going to be running diesel trains.
Yes.
So we're going to be running, I believe, off-lease Class 221s, which are the Voyagers, the tilting Voyagers, or Class 222s, which are the Meridians, which are coming off Middle and Main Line when
effectively the same train.
Trains. Effectively, so well, the Meridian doesn't tilt, and I don't think the tilt's relevant. But
so part of the choice you get, should you decide to do this, is go from Euston to Stirling in a Voyager. Wow.
Yeah. But it's a diesel train under wires for the vast majority of its route, and I just don't think that's optically. I think that's really bad. But I suppose the third reason I think it's bad, it's back to what we said earlier about complexity in an industry, and the whole rail reform bill is predicated on the fact that we're going to carry on with open access is a big thing, and open access. I do get why consumers can benefit from it, but it's more actors, more contracts, more interfaces at a time when we need fewer of all of the above. So that is my concern with it. Not at the micro level. I'm sure that people who use that service will benefit from it and enjoy it. I'm talking macro, and that's why I don't think it's a good idea.
I wouldn't disagree with any of that, Richard, and very similar arguments also apply to the newly announced open access service to Shrewsbury, which is rejuvenating the one that failed that Adrian Shooter tried to do, isn't it? If I've understood it correctly, the new open access operator, whose name escapes me at the minute, will run from Shrewsbury through to London, and the Avanti service to Shrewsbury, they have been told to stop running it, which am I reading this wrongly? But that means there is going to be a saving for the DfT on providing passenger services to Shrewsbury, the entire risk of which has now been passed over to an open access operator.
Yeah, I don't know what happens in terms of service guarantee. So if the open access operator fails, does that mean the franchised or concessioned service comes back? I don't know. But where's the consumer choice in that? Sorry. Have I missed something there?
No,
I thought the whole point of open access was the consumer got more choice.
No. Right. It's just it's been replaced.
Okay, so controversial comment of the day, open access, for now, please stop it.
But we know,
please stop anymore, because it's making things harder, not better.
But we've said this a number of times. We believe the reason for this is that this is the Prime Minister particularly is paranoid, it is said, about his right-wing defecting to reform. So it's all about continually throwing red meat to the private sector and the right wing of his party.
Yeah, and the private sector operators in the rail sector love it as well, because they've got a vested interest. I mean, I don't mean that in a kind of a disrespectful way. I can understand why, if you run an open access operation, you think it's a great thing and you want to do more of it. I mean, we're not daft. We understand why that is. But I think if we just look at the macro level, it might deliver some limited consumer benefits in certain locations and at certain times. But when you look at the big challenges facing the industry at the moment, this is not. I just don't think it's the right thing to be doing.
It's tiny, isn't it? What we should be doing is offering genuine benefits to the vast majority.
Yeah, get everything else working properly. No, listen,
coming back to your comment,
strong agreement,
heated agreement, a boring, reliable. And we make no apology for constantly repeating that.
No.
By the essence of a campaign, it requires repetition. But more than anything, what we need is for the railway to run well, to run reliably, to run effectively, and to provide the sort of service that people genuinely want and need, hopefully at a reasonable price. And they will come back.
Yeah, and they will.
And on that note, we've hit a hard stop with our timing and our clock. So thanks ever so much for being with us yet again for this discussion, Richard. Well, I've enjoyed it. Richard, have you?
Yeah, I think it's been great. I mean, I know it was a little bit kind of in some respects, but
what was that noise?
All right, yeah, touche. But I think it was a little bit sort of down. Oh my, yeah, I knew it was inevitable, wasn't it? Really, I think it was a little downbeat at one level. But do you know what? Here's a positive, uplifting thing to finish on. I think this is fixable. I genuinely think this is fixable. I do not look at the rail industry today and think there is no way out of this. I think it's challenging, but there is a way out of it. But the mindset needs to start. The mindset shift needs to start in Westminster, right?
It does, and we will continue to speak truth to power to get that point across, in the hope that we can maybe play some part in shifting the needle and hopefully making things better. But for now, enjoy the rest of the day, or whenever you're watching or listening this, whether it's breakfast time or you're pouring a glass in the evening. We'll be back next week with another magazine show, and we've got a really big, good interview coming up soon, and we'll be telling you about that in due course. So thanks for being with us. It's goodbye from me, Nigel Harris, and
it's goodbye from me, Richard Bowker.
We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.